Hello everyone, it's Judith here, and I thought I would just jump on this afternoon and do a quick demonstration of how I might go about painting an autumn leaf. The leaves are all down at the moment in this area, but unfortunately all the colours are very subdued because of all the rain and miserable weather we've got, and that's one of the ones that, this is one of the ones that I managed to get for you, which isn't really a terribly brilliant one. Let me just show it here. There we go. So that's one of the best ones I could find. So it's sort of yellow and green, and this is a sycamore leaf. And usually you can find ones which have the most glorious colours in them. So like oranges, reds, greens, browns, and all sorts of really vibrant colours, and they're a bit like the maple leaves that you might find in the US, the shape of them. So I've drawn a quick leaf out. The paper I'm working on today is a Bockingford. It's their extra rough. Bockingford is a really good halfway house sort of paper. It's good for beginners. It's a proper watercolour paper, behaves like watercolour paper. And it lifts very easily, which is a good thing for beginners as well, although don't get too reliant on the fact that you have paper that lifts, because as you move on to better paper, the cotton rag papers, they don't actually lift as easily. So you're better not relying too much on the paper to lift, but Bockingford does do that very, very well. Just as an aside, I'm quite a loose painter, not as loose as some, but quite a loose painter. And I started a group on Facebook, it's about 3 years ago now, and it's called Loosening Up with Watercolour and Brush Show. And I do workshops there, and obviously you need to be a member to find out what the workshops are all about. But I have done a Loosening Up workshop for the group in there. And so some of the tips and hints that I talk about in there I shall go over today, but obviously that's a more in-depth workshop, which you would see well, it's not available to everybody in the group. There is a cost for it, but that's a lot more in-depth about what it is that actually makes a loose painting. And the way I explain it in my video, I've never really heard it explained quite that way. So hopefully you would gain something from joining the group and having a look around there as well. So let's start off with this painting. I'm going to use just 3 colours. If you are ever stuck on what colours to use, I create little colour palettes. So this is the sort of thing where I mix and mingle 3, sometimes 4 colours, and see how I like them and whether I think they're going to work in a painting. So you can always do something like that to choose your actual colours. And then what I do is I stick to those colours. I don't introduce more colours. And that helps you during the painting. It helps you to decision make well in the painting, and it also helps to add colour harmony to your painting. So there are lots of reasons for choosing a limited palette and not introducing extra colours as you go along, because quite often they can look very, very out of place. I mix paint either on the paper or on my brush, mainly on the paper, but if I want to do something really dark, I might mix on the brush as well. So I'm going to use some burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, and some purple for this one. Now I've wiped all my paints. I work from tube paints, and I've sprayed them before I start so that the paints are all nice and moist. And what I do is I just dip into the paint and I create my wash on the paper, not in a palette. Okay, so if I dip in and the paint's too dark, I just add water to it. So let's get going with this. And I never paint with one colour for more than 1 inch or so. So now I will change the colour and go in with some of that lovely red or alizarin crimson. Let's add some purple now to this mix. Okay, so can you see they're all mixing nicely on the paper? What I'm doing as well is I'm making sure that I keep this edge, which is called the leading edge, I keep that wet, which means then that the paint will continue to mix and mingle nicely on the paper, and I won't start getting hard edges. Let's just put some more purple in. Purple and burnt sienna make a lovely, really dark brown, so it's a nice colour to use for these leaves. So again, watching this edge all the time. I'm going to, as well, not worry if I miss the paper in parts, because leaving white edges, random white edges in your painting is a good thing to do in watercolour painting, because as some of you will probably know, we use the white of the paper to create our lights. So I'm not bothered if I end up having little white spaces in this, because it will all help to make the painting sparkle. So again, watching all this edge around here, let's put a little bit of a stem in there as well. Before I go any further, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lose some of these edges that I've created into the background. Now, this is a pretty random process. I'm not sort of thinking, right, I'll go 2 inches away from that one and 1 inch away from that one. It's just purely random. I'm just washing the paint into the background. And if you come to have a go at this, you might need to practice it a few times. It's not something that's particularly easy to do, but if you practice it a bit, then you will understand how wet the paint needs to be and how wet your brush needs to be. Those are the crucial things. So let's just lose some of this as well now. What you can see is, though, I haven't lost all the edges. You can still see some of the edges are there, and that's what we want to do. We want to keep some semblance of the image, and possibly so that we can still see what it is. So don't lose it all. If you lose it all that you get is a wash on the paper. So we don't want that. We want to actually be able to see a little bit of the leaf. Let's lose some up here. And by not losing the whole of the edges, that way I can actually keep some of the essence of the leaf here. Okay. Just keeping this edge wet all the time. If I add too much water to it, then I will get cauliflowers. So I've got to keep the water balance right. And again, it really is just practice doing that. You get to have a feel for what's the right amount of water and what isn't. In fact, a lot of watercolour painting is just practice, because you've got to get a feel for the paint water balance, and then for whether your paper's wet or dry and how wet or dry it is. And that determines how much paint you then need to go in with without creating cauliflowers. So what we don't want when we're doing this is I don't want hard edges anywhere where I can see lines of paint developing. So I want all the paint to be mixing and mingling on the paper. So can you see it's a bit dark there? So I just go in with drop more water and dilute that a little bit on the paper. Again, it's a bit dark, so more water and just dilute on the paper. Okay, and so let's lose some of that as well into the background. And what this does is, because we're losing it in the background, it's also helping to create our background without us thinking too hard about it. How many of you have been at the stage where you've done the most glorious painting, say of a flower, or it doesn't matter what it is, but something that you might think would need a background, and then you think, oh, should I have done a background? Should I not have done a background? Oh, I mess backgrounds up. Oh, I don't know what to do. Well, by painting like this, we've now already got some of the background in place. Now, I don't know whether you can still see that's a leaf. What we can do is we can just put in some vein marks, and we can do this. The paint's still wet. Let's see whether we do this now. Yeah, that's letting us do it. Doesn't matter whether if the paint is quite wet, then the vein marks will turn brown. If the painting is quite thick but dry, the vein marks will be white, because what you're actually doing is scraping the paint away. What we're doing now is we're indenting the paper with the end of, I'm just using the end of a brush here, and the paint is still quite wet, so it's falling into the creases that I'm making on the paper. So I think now that's a bit clearer that is a leaf. Yes, I think you can see that on the screen, can't you? And what we have to do now is we have to leave that to dry. So I'm going to just blow dry that for a minute or two, and then I'll show you what we do when we come back to build the painting up again. Okay, so the painting's dry now, and I think you can see it's just dried a lot lighter, which is what happens with watercolour. It does dry lighter. And now we're going to start putting just a few of these edges back, adding a little bit more detail here and there. So we can highlight this area here by coming in behind the stem and the leaves and the leaf. And let's just create a little bit of negative painting around here. Just go around that area. I don't ever do a lot of negative painting in any one area. Again, variety is key. So I don't want to add too much to anything. And let's just soften that edge. So we can bring that back off into the background as well. And then I'm just going to turn it round and add the same here. I always tend to add, if I've got something separating a background, then I always tend to add a little bit of the same colour either side, because it's highly unlikely that that stem would interrupt the background exactly where there was a change. So let's just put a similar colour into that background there. And I think you'll see almost immediately that that has really highlighted the stem there on the leaf, which is what we wanted. Let's just soften that edge off as well. And again, I'm going to watch for these edges. I don't want hard edges developing where I don't want them. I want the hard edges developing where I've put them. Okay, so we could come in around this area with a bit of negative painting. So let's just add a little bit around there. And I'm actually mixing the paint on my brush for this, because I'm going in darker. And sometimes I'll dip in all three colours. And again, I don't know how that's going to turn out or not. But that's the beauty of doing it like this, because you never actually know what's going to happen. So let's just, and I might think that that's a little bit too much in that area. And if I do, then I can just break it up a little bit and just interrupt the line a little bit there. And maybe again up there. So we've done 2 lots of painting. Let's do a little bit of positive painting now. So we can add a little bit of a positive edge up here. And again, this is a little bit of a random exercise, but I am looking around the painting and just seeing where I think it might need a little bit of detail. So let's just come up there. And again, we don't want such a dark, hard area there. Let's just soften that off. And maybe we could do a little bit of positive painting down here as well, on this little edge here. So all the time I'm bringing the painting back and letting the viewer see a few edges which weren't there before, but now I've actually introduced those edges. So it's making the whole thing a little bit clearer now as to what the subject is. Soften again. And let's come along here. I might do a little bit of positive painting along here, or maybe just along this edge here. And we could darken the centre a little bit if we wanted to. Add a little bit more paint into the centre areas, just to add a bit more drama there. Up here. And again, I'm just varying the colour as I go around the painting. Just having a look at it, it helps sometimes to look at things on the screen as well. And really, once you see your subjects has emerged, you don't necessarily need to do anything else to it. A bit too much there. I think I might leave that one as it is. Maybe put a tiny touch at the end there. And where I put my marks would be different maybe to where you would put your marks. And that is to do with just a personal vision of it, really, because we all see things slightly differently. So it doesn't mean that where you might decide to put your marks is wrong and I'm right. It could just be that that's where you feel it needs something. Because what this now does, it helps you to build up the composition and it helps the eye to move around the painting rather than moving out of the painting, which is really what we're all trying to do. Let's just soften that area there. We're all trying to keep the viewer engaged on the painting rather than having them move out of the painting. Might just put a little bit of negative painting around that edge there. What you've got to be careful of is when you're doing this, you don't want to all the edges back, because then there's no point losing them all in the first place. That makes sense. We've gone ahead and lost them, but we don't want to bring them all back again. So let's just finish that little area off. So here we are. We've got lost edges here. We've got some hard edges. I'm sure if I look around, I can find some softish edges. Soft edges are the ones that are sort of ghost-like edges, and they really help as well in creating a variety of edge. And that's what we're really looking for in a loose painting. We want a variety of all these edges happening. And then another thing that helps a loose painting is to just do a little bit of splattering. And if I'm splattering, I always use the colours that I've used in the painting. I would never invite another colour. And splattering can also help harmonise the colour around your painting as well. So that if, for example, you've got something in the sky, say, and you've got some colours, you might have two colours in the sky, and you might have one similar colour in the foreground and another colour. By putting some of the sky colour in the foreground with a bit of splattering, it will help harmonise the colours around the painting. So if we just put a little splattering down here with the three colours that I've used. Some of the paper's still a bit wet, so it's not really, some of it's just spreading, but that doesn't really matter. Don't necessarily need to have it all clean splatters, because that just helps the texture of the painting as well. So I think that's probably about it. That's just a little quick demonstration of how to go about painting an autumn leaf. And you can do this with any colours you like. It doesn't really matter if you're going to use these particularly autumn colours. I mean, I've done a few like this. You see there's another one. All this, those are similar colours, but then I've done that one, which is, those are different colours and obviously brighter colours. I've done a brush show one here. Again, all different colours, and of course you get a lot more texture with the brush show because it just creates the texture itself. Let's see if I've got any other different ones here to show you. And that's another one. So you can see the options for the colours that you could use are just endless. You know, you can just play to your heart's content. I've done them with turquoise and pinks and yellows. It is the shape and the values which will determine the subject for you, not the colours. So that's just a little insight into how I might do something. Do pop onto Facebook and have a look in the group, Loosening Up with Watercolour and Brush Show. You have to request to join, but usually I'm online often enough to accept the requests. And you'll see lots of tips and techniques and hints in there. And I usually run a workshop once every fortnight or once every 3 weeks. And the workshops are a little bit different to this because they are completely interactive, so that I can speak to all the participants and view their work and offer what's quite important really. I can offer feedback in real time, and I think the people who actually participate in the workshops, they find that really, really beneficial, because it can often rescue a painting before they've gone too far with it, and also just give them some ideas as to how to go about finishing and completing their painting. Okay, so I hope to see you all in there soon, and I hope you've enjoyed this little video. Okay, bye.